Hello and welcome to the channel everybody, I'm Jason Storm, and in this video I want to talk about the Ryzen 5 2600 versus the Ryzen 7 3800 XT and just how much difference there is in gaming and streaming at the same time, in particular on one of the most intensive games I have here on this sim rig, and that's Assetto Corsa Competizione. Now, if you've been following along, you may have noticed a few weeks ago I put out a new video showing you all the new sim setup, and in that video I said I did upgrade the CPU here from a Ryzen 5 2600 to the new AMD 3800 XT, 8 cores, 16 threads, a little better than the 6 cores, 12 threads on the 2600. Now in this computer, I'm currently running MSI Radeon 5700 8GB graphics card. I'm running 3200 megahertz of 16GB RAM, and then the only change between these have been the CPU, the 2600 and the 3800 XT. Now the Ryzen 5 2600 was quite good in most games. I was still getting over 100 FPS on triple 1080 screens and or my Oculus Rift S. Frames have generally been quite good, not a massive problem. However, with the Assetto Corsa Competizione, it's quite intensive, so I've been trying to optimize my computer to run Assetto Corsa Competizione well, and then everything else will just be whatever it is, because it's going to be higher anyway. That's how I like to do things. Make your computer for your most intensive game and then you're fine. So let's talk about the figures of the Ryzen 5 2600. Now, if I'm running triple 1080 screens, the Ryzen 5 2600 was struggling to even hit 60 FPS on my 144Hz monitors. Most of the time it was around the 55-ish FPS, so not great. But I don't really want to focus on the triple screens as much because the VR is more intensive, and as I said before, intensive is what I'm trying to optimize the computer for. So let's mainly focus on VR here. With the VR, not streaming, just gaming on VR, the 2600 could only really hit about 40 FPS, which on an 80Hz Oculus Rift S screen is only half of what it was capable of. So not great. Of course, when I wanted to record and or stream, that got severely worse. When opening OBS and recording in X264 very fast, things got terrible. We were barely averaging 20 FPS, quite often dips to below even 16 FPS, and in a racing game that's not great. And after I whacked in the 3800 XT, things started looking a little better. I opened up Assetto Corsa Competizione, and the first thing I did was actually open OBS as well to see what I got while gaming and recording at the same time. So off I set on a race in Assetto Corsa Competizione, and I did a 10-minute race with AI, 25 others, which again is a little bit CPU intensive. And after finishing the race, I checked out what FPS I was pulling. And to my amazement, while gaming and recording at the same time, I hit an average of around 55 FPS. That's more than what I was getting before not streaming or recording at all. And I wasn't entirely convinced. I'm like, was I actually recording? And I had to check to see that I was actually recording. It was actually a higher jump than I expected. And so I did another race again, just to make sure the results were accurate. And again, I averaged around 55 FPS. And so I'm like, sick, what's it going to do when I'm not recording? So I turned off my OBS and just let it focus on racing. So I did again a 10-minute race, same track, and checked out the results. And I was getting around 75 FPS. That's more than I was getting triple screen gaming on the 2600. And I was doing it in VR. And having about 75 FPS is pretty much close to what the 80 Hertz limit is on the Rift S screen. So I was pretty happy with that. Now ideally I would like to get about 75, 80 FPS while recording, but for that I probably would have had to go to the Ryzen 7 3900 XT, which was an extra $100 Australian, and I just didn't feel I wanted to spend that, particularly because at the time the new Ryzen CPUs were about to come out. However, maybe I do kind of regret that a little bit. I do believe the more cores and more threads on the Ryzen 3900 XT would have helped bridge the gap between recording and not recording. I did notice while the 3800 XT was gaming and streaming / recording, the CPU was pretty much pegged on about 98%, 100, something around there. But to be honest, the 3800 XT did do much better than what I expected it to. I did not expect to be getting about 75 FPS in VR in this game. And to be honest, when I'm in the game playing on the Ryzen 7 3800 XT and my 5700 graphics card, the 55-ish FPS that I'm getting while recording is absolutely playable, not really getting many stutters or anything, totally playable. In saying that, all my graphics are set to low to medium, simply because this game is quite intensive. Going forward, I'll probably try to manipulate those a little bit more, maybe get slightly better quality out of it now, but that's for another day. I did try a few other tests. I went into OBS and I changed X264 encoding from very fast over to fast, and I went from about 55 FPS down to about 51 FPS. So I dropped about 4 FPS, not massively noticeable, and with the recording between super fast and fast, I didn't see a massive difference anyway. So I'm probably going to keep it on very fast, simply because I think that's probably enough for recording and streaming anyway. I also did take it off X264 encoding, and I decided to use the AMD AMF hardware encoding on the graphics card. And as some of you may know, AMF is not particularly good, is not as good as X264, which is why I tend to prefer NVIDIA's NVENC encoders on the NVIDIA graphics cards, because NVENC will take the load off your CPU and record better than what very fast is in X264. NVIDIA's NVENC encoder is probably similar quality to what the fast is, all while not hampering the game too much. So I reckon if I change the 5700 graphics card out to NVIDIA 2080 Super or something with an NVENC encoder, I would probably see better FPS here by probably 10 FPS or so, because when the load comes off the CPU and gets put onto the GPU's dedicated NVENC encoder, then of course I'm going to get my frames back. However, currently with the 5700 graphics card, I am unfortunately throwing away a bit of FPS because I have to encode on the CPU, and this game is unfortunately CPU intensive. In most games, recording with X264 isn't going to be a major drama, because CPUs just normally don't do a particularly lot in game, particularly the Ryzen 7 3800 XT. In most games I find it barely does any work at all. However, unfortunately, the intensive CPU game like Assetto Corsa Competizione, that is going to affect it. I think that's something actually I'm going to test out in the future. I'm going to try to get my hands on a newer NVIDIA graphics card and actually do some testing, and I'll put up a video of it once I do. And I'm very curious to actually see the difference there. So really happy with the jump of around 20-ish, 25-ish FPS here in these games because of the 3800 XT over the 2600. It's done pretty much exactly what I wanted it to, if not maybe a little bit more. So if you're triple screen gaming or VR gaming and wanting to record and stream and all that at the same time, well, even if you're doing like 1440p or 4K gaming, I really do think having a Ryzen 7 over a Ryzen 5 is a really big help. Even if it's not the 3800 XT, even if it's just the 3700, I think the Ryzen 7 in general is just a big benefit here in gaming and streaming at the same time. Just simply because more cores and more threads. So thanks for watching this video, everybody. Hit that like button if you liked it, subscribe for more videos, and I will see you in the next video.